Recording in progress.
Welcome everyone to You Be the Judge. We're here every Wednesday from 6 to 7 Eastern Standard Time p.m. And we are so lucky because the sun is even out longer. So when we get off the show, we can actually go outside and partake in being in still the sun. So my name is Dr. Paul Dyer, as you know. We're here every Wednesday. And my other two lovely co-hosts is Marylin, Pierre, and Judge Claudia Barber. Judge Claudia Barber will probably be joining us later. If not, she's hopefully busy and doing things as being a Judge Barber does. But we also always have the lovely and Marylin Pierre, Esquire, attorney in our state, Maryland, and New York and Connecticut.
I'm just laughing because I had to get to the point where you actually say it without me bothering you. Instead of, here's Marylin Pierre here. And yes, our lovely co-host. And, it's not that I'm vain or anything. It's just that I'm like, well, wait a second. If you could say one about one and not the other, it's got to comment on me.
I'm able to learn. That's one thing. That's one thing I can do is learn. It may take me a while, but I can learn.
Yeah, I know how it is. That's okay. I've forgiven you. You can go ahead. And my handsome co-host, Dr. Paul Dyer, and our beautiful and handsome audience,
yes,
as well.
So we actually don't have a guest on this week, and we'll have one maybe next week and the week after. But we are just wrapping up here in Maryland the General Assembly, and we have a lot to talk about with DeSantis, Tennessee. All these things are happening all over our country that has been happening. But someone had said something to me about 2 days ago, and they said, it looks like our country has no direction anymore. And I was like, well, what do you mean? They're like, it just looks like it's falling apart and has no direction. And I had to say that, I just did this research to how the world has gotten better. On a larger scale, the world has gotten better. We are more educated. Throughout the world. I mean, you gotta look at the macro, not the micro. So throughout the world,
yes, that's true.
Some
people want to talk about the good old days, and I'm like, good for who?
Yeah, actually,
because
right.
The world has gotten better for people like me.
Right, and it's gotten better for people in smaller countries and little corners of the world where they're able to grow food or get food. It's just gotten better. Now, in the micro, you can say things are going backwards, or things are trying to stall, and I would also agree with you there. So we get so much news so much faster, than we did 50 years ago, than we did 20 years ago. So our news, our informational. It's not that it can be overwhelming because I love it, but it's that it seems like it's always going on. When it was always going on, you just didn't hear about it. Unless you knew someone there, unless you had someone there, unless you had a connection to this land, that state, that county, wherever it was, this country. If you didn't know anyone, you didn't know what was happening. Now, you don't have to know anyone in Ireland, Northern Ireland. And they're working through a thing there with the IRA, right? So there's an issue there too with the Protestants still and with the Catholics. So how do you know that? I get the news. Why? Because maybe I look for it. Maybe I have connections there. But you can still gather news wherever you want it. So for you not to know, you have to choose not to know. That's how I feel about information.
Sometimes you have to choose not to know because of your mental health.
Well, that's
like
different.
You said, because there's always news. There's always so much going on that sometimes we need a break, a vacation from the news like we need a vacation from work.
Well, then I always, not always, I have said develop a practice that clears your soul and spirit. And you don't have to develop a practice just because of all the other stuff, but develop a practice that keeps you strong, that keeps you solid within your marriage, within your family, within your own personal space. Because when you leave your space of comfort and care, you're going to there's our lovely co-host, Judge Claudia Barber. Is she in Egypt now? Where is she? Still in the States? I thought the FBI had gotten her like they did, Are you still with us?
Listening. The FBI, the NSA, the CIA.
If you're in a black site, Judge Claudia Barber, just touch your nose. You don't have to say anything.
Or blink twice.
Yeah, blink twice. Right. If you're being held captive, we know.
We can't see her hands, so she might.
Right, she could be bowing in, right? She's reading off a cardboard script, like, you got to say this.
Oh, it's so good to see everybody.
Yeah.
You too. Great to see you too.
Oh, my. What a wonderful, wonderful opportunity to be here today. Yeah. I'm glad to see everyone.
Well, I have to give Judge Claudia Barber a thank you because at the caucus meeting yesterday, she was supposed to be one of the moderator. So as soon as I walked in, the Honorable Carl Snowden said, Dr. P. So I got the chance to step in for the lovely Judge Claudia Barber and to
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you so much. That was so necessary.
You did an excellent job. It was a terrific topic. For those of you who don't know what the topic was about, it was about preparing for, the inevitable. Right. They say that there are two sure things in life, and that's death and taxes. Well, we weren't talking about taxes. So we were talking about death. And I know it's an uncomfortable thing to talk about, but we really have got to talk about it and make arrangements so that we
have a final plan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Have a final plan.
Mm-hmm.
But
because if you don't have a plan, then somebody else you don't know is going to be making the plans for you. And I know people would prefer to make their own plans.
And Marylin having the first black register of wills is absolutely outstanding.
Well, it's the county, Anne Arundel
County.
It's Anne Arundel counties. Yeah. And so it's exciting that this topic has kind of been an open forum for us to talk about a lot. We have so much to catch up on.
Yes,
don't you think?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Are you allowed to say what you've been doing, or are you okay?
I am. I'm well.
Okay.
I'm well. It's in fact, I have to jump off here at 6:30 because I have a transportation commission meeting at 6:30. So, but I had to jump on and say greetings to everybody. And since the last time we've talked, there have been really important indictments, and there's just been too many shootings, way too many shootings. And just before I came on the air, I was reading about another shooting, a targeted shooting in Pennsylvania, in which a school teacher was shot and killed in a Dunkin' Donuts drive-through. And that's just so sad. It's to me, at some point you think that this is going to elevate to people making major changes, legislators making major changes in gun laws.
Okay.
But
it's not okay. First of all, I'll let people know what side I am on. If people don't know, I'm a gun guy. I'm a lot of gun guy, and I really believe in the right to own weapons and respectfully blah blah blah. But it's a human issue, and I'll tell you why. Recently, my grandson, who's in second grade, the backstory is he had told a kid to stop, and he pushed him. This kid was in the lunchroom picking on a girl, and he went over to the kid and pushed him and told him to stop. This was on a Tuesday. The kid comes to school on a Wednesday with a knife in his backpack to kill my grandson. Here's how they found the the knife. It fell out when they were going home. It fell out of his backpack. So the teacher said, why is this knife? And then pulls off to the side. So the next day, my grandson goes to school, and he tells the kid that had the knife, tells my grandson, I brought the knife to school to stab you. My grandson throws up for being so upset and upset, scared, doesn't matter what it is. They call my daughter, his mom, and she picks him up, and on the way home, he tells his mom that the kid, because the parents got a mass email, we found a knife in school. So, but now my grandson tells his mom that the kid told him that he wanted to kill him. So she immediately calls to school, and other things ensued. But here's the thing, what I'm talking about is a human issue. He's a second grader, so at 7 years old, believes that bringing a weapon to cause harm, specifically, he knows this. Where did he get that level of maturity knowing that this could cause death? We don't have a gun issue. We don't have a knife issue. We have a human issue. And I don't know if you can ever legislate humans.
Well, that's very similar to it was at Newport News, Virginia, that shooting. A 6-year-old brings a gun to school and shoots the teacher. But the teacher survives. Yeah. But the mom is criminally charged with criminal negligence or neglect of a child, and so on. And there's more investigations going on as well. So that again is a juvenile matter, again, where the juvenile has violent intentions.
Again, it's a juvenile. You have to develop this juvenile in some form of a incubator. I don't know if you want to call it a home, but it's being incubated in a place.
Which is why I want to know what has happened to that 7-year-old, and how did they bring his family in, and what do they intend to do about him bringing a knife to school?
Right, because that is the issue.
Oh, and by the way, I want to say I'm so happy that your grandson is safe and he wasn't hurt, because this could have ended up really, really much worse than it is. Not just fear of harm, but fear of harm and actual harm. So I'm glad that your grandson is not physically harmed.
Okay, he's okay, but the other kid that does get stabbed in second grade is not okay, because we know that's happening, or we know it's going to happen. We know that we know that these 15-year-olds are shooting 15-year-olds, right? We know this is happening, whether it happens at 7 years old or 14 years old. Where does his mindset come with, I'd rather just kill you because of ... You can fill in, who cares about the dots? Where are they getting the mindset?
Well, I care about the dot because I want to know where the mindset comes from. What did his parents do about it? Did they, what was going on in that house, and what's going to keep him when he turns 8, 9, 10, 15, whatever, from then grabbing a gun if there is one in the house, or he finds one somewhere, to bring it to school and then do whatever. And that's why I think it's important to discuss what they did with him, because are they going to try to turn this ship around, or are they going to say, "Oh, okay, no harm, no foul"?
You would have to. Yeah.
Wow. I think that there should be some disciplinary action and intervention
in the house
on the child that brought in the knife. And
what about the home?
That's major. That's major.
Exactly. That's exactly. That needs to be looked at to see what happened. There needs to be a change, and we don't know exactly where the change is going to happen.
So I think Will's going to say something. But are we saying we're going to allow now the school, i.e., government, in your home, because obviously we now know something is more wrong than right?
Oh, there should definitely be some intervention.
Okay.
Because
I don't disagree with that.
If that was my grandchild who was possibly put in
harm's way,
who something could have happened like that, because he was the target of potential harm.
Right.
And had that knife not been found, who would have known? And if there's no intervention, there's nothing that keeps the child from bringing the knife to school again. And who knows, maybe this time he's going to do something in the morning before he even enters the school. He waits outside for someone he's angry at. And when that person attempts to go into school, then he does something. So, yeah, there definitely needs to be some intervention.
Go ahead, Will.
Okay. I would simply point out that the mother could be a perfectly decent mother.
Okay.
And who left the gun in the wrong place. And that a certain proportion of kids are nutty in a bad way, and if you had for example in a class at school, you had kids interacting with other kids. Maybe there's some way to create in kids' minds the feeling that the other kids are also human beings.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, this is social workers or something like that. There may be games that kids play that cause one kid to realize that the other kid is also a human being entitled to a certain amount of respect. I have no idea how it's done, but I would certainly like to see the use of my taxpayers' money to achieve that result.
Yeah, me too. Because if some empathy could be developed in that child, that in the long run helps us all. Because, like I said, that possibly could keep him from picking up a knife tomorrow and doing it again, and this time maybe be able to reach his goal. And that's what the fear is. The fear is that if there's no intervention, he might be able to reach his goal. And I agree with you, Will. Just because this happened doesn't mean that the parent is necessarily a bad parent.
No.
But I do think that there needs to be some, this needs to be looked into to find out what happened. And if the parent's not a bad parent, I would be really happy to hear that, because that means that, to me, that there's more hope than if the parent is a bad parent and the parent is like, it's like, that's the way I handle things, so that's the way I taught my child. And Reynolds has raised his hand.
So my question is this. Why is it that they're holding this parent, when we talk about a Carl Rittenhouse, and I know there are different laws in different states or whatever, but he was a minor. He was a minor, and they expressed that he was a minor who took an assault rifle over state lines and killed and maimed. And his parents were not held, even though he was 17 at the time. And I just want to understand how we selectively prosecute parents for the actions of their children. Also, we need to understand that this is a violent world. The media is violent. The games are violent. The cartoons are violent. And that's what they're seeing. I don't think that that the child has an internalization of just how much of an impact that will have on another person, because it just has repeated itself throughout the years. All of this violence, the violence.
We don't know how these people, what sometimes young people are watching on the internet,
or intaking was what you were going to say,
what they're intaking violence wise on the internet. Because if they have immature minds at age and mindsets at age 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and so on, then it stands to reason that yes, children do make foolish mistakes, and if they can't comprehend the value of human life, and they only see it in the eyes of the violence that they see in the media, then that is a problem. And I think that that's something that needs to be addressed. And the media should be held to some degree accountable, because they're complicit in this.
Well, didn't they?
It's not TikTok, it's social media.
So growing up, that level of violence would occur like at the age of 17, 18, 19. But now if it's coming down to like a 7-year-old and 6 years old, as just to piggyback on what Teresa already said, what has happened in our society that has caused that level of violence that used to occur at such an older age, where it's happening at such a lower age. And again, to piggyback on Dr. Dyer's comment, is that, you have all of those violent games like Call of Duty that has excellent graphics, but it's also very violent. So I think all of that is being internalized, and now it's being projected back into society.
So I don't agree with that. I agree with what Dr. Dyer was saying at the beginning. Things are bad, but things are an improvement of the way they used to be before. Before, you could have a 7-year-old, even younger, take a knife, and hurt somebody. And, because people weren't recognized as certain people weren't recognized as human. So you hurt somebody, so what? I think it's called The Pig Farmer's Daughter, where this man sued because someone had hurt his slave. So it wasn't that he sued because you hurt somebody that cared about. You hurt another human being.
Right.
He sued and won because someone hurt his property. So yes, we're hearing about 7-year-olds now. We just didn't hear about them before. So I do think that we are making progress, and I do think that we need to make more progress. But on the other hand, to say that this is only happening now because of social media, I don't think that's the reason. I think that if you were brought up in a certain way and you were brought up with empathy, it's hard for social media to change you and all of a sudden make you more violent than you already were.
Judge Barber, I know you have to go, so go ahead, please.
So I think that, there's just so much that I haven't said, and because it's been such a long time. But I think that the whole point of the guns is the fact that they're getting in the wrong hands. But I have to slightly give the media a teeny incy bit of credit, and that is that we are now seeing more reports of gun violent stories in other areas of the country like never before. They didn't used to report this stuff.
No.
But you see it on national television regularly. And maybe a little bit of credit to the media that they are exposing the seriousness of this, because people are afraid to go to the corner grocery store, based on what happened in Buffalo, New York. And they're, based on their carjackings in Arlington, Virginia, their carjackings in Washington, D.C. So those episodes are serious. enough for you and I, every single person on this Zoom call, to be concerned about, your whereabouts and to watch your whereabouts so that, your people think they're safe. And then I'm sure everybody that went into that grocery store in Buffalo, New York thought they were safe. I'm sure they did.
Yeah. And if I can say something. My heart really hurts for them. But the issue is this, though. Are we more afraid of this than we are something that we should actually be afraid of? And that's really what my concern is. Because the media talks about these things, we don't see the everyday shooting.
No, we only get half the story.
Exactly. And
I want to say, if I can say something for a second here.
People that
go ahead,
Jeff.
My apologies. I'm sorry I'm late. I thought this was at 6:30, and I looked at the email again and noticed it was 6 o'clock, so I'm late. I apologize.
Thank you for joining us.
No, you're right on time when you show up.
But my views about this is that I partially agree with some of you, but I also partially disagree as well, is that there's a saying in sociology that the only excuse that human beings ever needed to be nasty to one another was permission. Mm-hmm. And I've said for a long time that the greatest thing about the internet is also the worst thing about it, in that you can find anything you want. Well, that's also why it's the worst thing, because you can find anything you want. So it is, and human beings for a long time have said, they especially as our society has moved forward into a digital age, but we've been this way for a long time, where people wanted to spend as little time getting to know you as possible because they wanted to slap a label on your forehead and then treat you per that label for the rest of your life. Mm-hmm. The advantage that social media has is that label, you don't even have to show up to have that label slapped on your forehead now. People can say all kinds of nasty things about you, and people are liking to agree with it. They don't even know you, but they're liking to agree with it because they want to believe the worst about people. Now, to the point of crime is actually down a lot over the last 40 years.
That's what I was saying.
Where a big problem is that, and this is not trying to dissuade or diminish any of these nasty shootings.
No.
Okay. Guns, in my mind, the biggest problem with guns is guns make it easier to exacerbate a situation. So a disagreement that might have resulted in a fist fight once now results in somebody getting shot and killed because guns are so prevalent. So they are definitely what's the word I want? It's exacerbated. That's another word. It starts with an E, and it starts X something or other. I have no brain today. But the thing is that it's like that's where a lot of this comes from. Unfortunately, the other issue as well is that once upon a time we used to have free television. That television airtime was paid for through ads. Now everything is online. It's all cable. It's all paid for through subscriptions. So there is an incentive to have 24/7 coverage, even if they don't have 24 hours worth of actual news. So how many times do you see the same thing happen and it gets repeated 100 times during the day? People don't see.
Yeah, Jeff, what you're saying reminds me of the movie Bowling for Columbine by Michael Moore, where he talks about the difference between media coverage in the United States and media coverage in Canada.
Yeah.
And media coverage in the United States is, if it leads, it bleeds, whereas in Canada, at least at the time of the movie, they had a different approach. And so that's why he was able to show that in Canada, people at that time didn't lock their doors because they didn't believe that they were in danger.
Well, you see a similar thing over in European countries as well. They're not. They update the news when there is a legitimate update, and it's not. But here, it's like they need to repeat the same story every single show, every single hour, again and again and again and again and again. Human beings, with something that is interestingly unique to the United States is that we seem to believe that the more often something gets repeated, the more likely it is to be true,
or more,
and if something's
or having more importance.
Right. If something's already true, then we are inclined to think that it's of greater importance and more intense. Why do you think Fox News, for example, showed the same Wendy's, the same 3 buildings burning all of the time during the protests during 2020 over George Floyd's death? Okay. There wasn't that much destruction, but if you're showing the same buildings all the time on fire, it's easy to translate that into whole cities are burning to the ground. Be afraid.
That's also true. Even the tone of urgency, it's like, oh my God, the world's coming to an end. And sometimes I wonder why teachers don't actually use that tone in class when they're teaching things. Okay, Bernadette had her hand up for a while.
My apologies. I've been interrupting, haven't I?
No, that's fine.
No problem. Anyway, nice to see everybody on the call.
How you been?
I've been hanging in there, and
because we've been worried about you.
No, she's been joining us by telephone.
I joined by telephone last week.
It's cool. She's establishing an alibi right now.
I know.
But I can see a number of threads in what a number of folks have brought up during this conversation, and I'm assuming it's under the theme of how do we get ourselves together given the divisive nature of our society that we're currently perceiving in this country. I slightly disagree with some of the comments and wholeheartely agree with others.
Well, you're not allowed to disagree, so we're just gonna have to, get you off.
I'll focus on the common areas. I think the common issues that we need to identify in our country is the harshness of the capitalist system in which we live. Dr. Paul, who said that, it's not the guns that are the problem, it's not the knives that are the problem, these are people problems. What I'd like to say is that all around the world, there are people problems, but they don't have the guns that we have in this country. And so the guns that we have in this country, while we can look at statistics and say that there might have been a decrease in crime nationally, which there have been over the last 40 years, when we compare ourselves to our peer nations, our level of crime is alarmingly high. Yeah. The level of civilian gun ownership is alarmingly high. We well surpass the next 10 countries combined. And while others have the same rate of mental health issues, yet many of them have a social universal healthcare system that can address those healthcare issues, and they don't have the knives and the guns, especially the guns, that can affect the suicides and the accidental deaths that we experience in our country. And given, we've been going around this whole issue of social media. The great thing about social media is that more and more Americans are seeing what the lifestyle is like in other peer countries. We can no longer sit around in our bubble. And those of us who are privileged to have access to social media, because that's even a whole other issue, in unequal access to social media and Wi-Fi in this country. And it's because of the capitalist system that doesn't fund the commons, but focuses on for-profit in too many industries, including the media. But for those of us who have access to social media, we are seeing that there are other ways of living in other countries. And it's all related to the lessons that they learned post-World War II about investing in people and investing in infrastructure. And because of our unique history of how we built up this country on the backs of genocide and enslavement, we haven't come around to investing in people in the same way that those other countries did.
So Bernadette, you kind of really answered your question. We don't invest in people because that's not the capitalistic way unless I get a profit from people. Right?
Absolutely.
So one of the things that in capitalism, the few don't make more if the many are more educated, just better workers. So as our education level has decreased in 40 years and other peer countries has increased, and with the ways they have developed their country, more of a village system, do you think education is the barrier why our crime is up? Because we have less cognitive development of the people, so their reaction is more reactionary and not conceptualized.
Absolutely. Lack of investment in education, lack of investment in healthcare. These are two fundamental issues. And that, because we don't have also that social safety net, not enough of us have the bandwidth even
That's right.
to do that community work. Our society has become so transactional. I interact with you if I can get something out of that transaction, out of that interaction, instead of thinking I interact with you because we are both human beings, both building a country together.
That's why I differ from you. I understand exactly what you're saying, and I agree a whole lot. But where I differ from you is I don't believe it's capitalism itself. I believe it's the way that capitalism is practiced by some people.
Absolutely.
Because
to Bernadette's point,
if you think about capitalism, and if you think about capitalism long range, you could make a profit, but still have a heart. But there has to be some investment. The way it's practiced nowadays is that we want an instant return on our investment, and we want the most possible return possible. And so because of that,
I was going to say
one quick 2 seconds.
Sorry, Bernadette.
Yeah, no, just one quick 2 seconds. Right. I meant U.S. style capitalism as it is currently practiced since at least President Nixon.
Well, no, actually, this has been a problem for a long time. It's where even well before Nixon.
Of course. That's why I said.
Where the problem is, what I'm getting at is that it's like we have people who they revere Adam Smith, and it is who coined the actual term capitalism, but apparently never read all of On the Wealth of Nations.
No.
Because he himself said that capitalism was a difference engine, which moved money from the masses to a smaller number of people. But unless there was some mechanism to move money back, move the capital back, that the system was unstable and would collapse. Something that Karl Marx picked up 100 years later and commented on. But the thing is that a lot of people who've read On the Wealth of Nations have never read on the Theory of Moral Sentiments.
I read both.
Something he also wrote, where he basically stated that people had a moral obligation to help those less well off than themselves. End of discussion. Right. And he was hoping that, because one of the reasons why he said that regulation should be reduced as much as practicable, and that was his term, not possible, which is not as much as possible, which is the way it's interpreted today, but it's as much as practicable. On the Theory of Moral Sentiments, he hoped that kind of social embarrassment would lead the rich to provide that mechanism for moving wealth back down the ladder. We have completely forgotten that other part. And so every group, unfortunately, has been utilized in a horrible way. I once used to joke with my students, because I was a high school math teacher, but only for inner city schools. And I commented to some of my students one time, on more than one occasion, we'd have lots of conversations after school. And I said, unfortunately, the history of the United States has always been that the empowered group, every time it's been threatened to be overwhelmed by the disenfranchised, has always magically managed to expand the boundaries of what it meant to be part of that empowered group. And suddenly because of the promise that, oh yes, now that you're empowered, you too are privileged.
Mm-hmm. I have a question. I was
able to maintain that system. So I always used to tell them, I said, because of that trending, and these are all black and brown students. And I said, don't be surprised if you wake up one of these mornings and suddenly discover you're all white.
That's right.
You've all been white all along. It's like, because that's what's going to happen. Unfortunately, and I'm sad. I hope that's not what has to happen. But it's like, really, it's like, I had a mentor, a couple of my mentors who loved to say they longed for a world, and I'm still hoping for this. I'm still working for it. They longed for a world where people respected one another because of their differences, not tolerated one another in spite of them. And this is to Bernadette's point. It's like if people did that, then we wouldn't have all these problems.
Go ahead, Danita. What's your question?
Yes.
Even though you're raising your physical hand, and Marylin can't see your physical hand.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought she could.
Just interrupt me, Zanita. I'm used to it.
Oh, okay. I want to know what you think the group thinks about the CBDC system that is already in place but is about to be utilized. It's utilized in other countries like Nigeria. It's not going well because 60% of their population does not have access to the internet. So to go digital, you have to have the internet. But we're about to go into that system. The dollar is failing. It's losing its value as we speak. So what do you think about that?
You want to explain what the system that's going to? Maybe some others don't know.
Well, the CBDC would do away with cash, the fiat money, and institute a digital dollar, a Fed dollar that is controlled. They can control everybody. Basically, you're a puppet on a string. And so they can track every transaction, your every move. You will not be able to evade taxes. You will not be able to hide money anywhere.
Well,
we kind of already do that.
Yeah, we kind of already do that already.
Kind of.
Yeah.
No, every time you've used a debit card or a credit card, what do you do?
But 100% will be your dollars. That's different. Out and nobody will care because they're not worth it.
The reason.
Yeah, well, because it's different in the sense that if you have bags and bags of cash in your house, you can go out and buy things for cash and no one would know the difference. If you keep it under a certain level per day, so on and so forth.
10,000.
However, under the Nigerian system, if you have bags and bags of cash, that's worth nothing. Now. Mm-hmm. So it's basically a way of disenfranchising people as well. It's not as if they say, "Oh, bring your cash in and you could put it in, and that will be used by you in the future when you make transactions." So not only is it a way of invading your privacy, it's also a way of disenfranchising people. And I hear that other places are considering bringing it to their countries and things like that.
124 right now, including America.
Right.
Yeah, we should be very afraid of that, not only because of the tax consequences, but because of people controlling.
Well, they kind of did that. They've been working towards. You can call it any way you want, but when it went to the euro dollar, that they were all considering that North America having its own. They've always been trying to work that federal, but they still have to have their federalization of banking system to control the flow. So that's always still going to be in place. There's still going to be
this is different. Yeah, this is different. And I thought that people would think that crypto would take care of that, but crypto is just so well. Believe me, I'm not a fan of crypto because I can't understand how people could just say, hey, this code is money now, or this code is an asset, and therefore it becomes an asset. I don't understand that. I'm not advertising for it, but I think that's why some people were moving towards crypto. But I don't think that's the answer either. I don't see the problem that Nigeria had with cash that made them want to go to that system. I don't see the benefit to anybody else except the people who want to keep track of what to keep track of each and every transaction that somebody is making, and we already have that problem on a small scale, let alone having that problem on a larger scale. Like for instance, I think they said that someone's husband found out someone's parent found out she was pregnant based on what she was purchasing, and she wasn't ready to tell her parents that she was pregnant yet. And so the fact that some algorithm could determine whether or not this child was pregnant and notified her parents, congratulations, here's a coupon for diapers.
And the thing is, like, Marylin, it goes way past that too, because we've got to worry about data collection of all kinds. I mean, Google's been all the big tech companies, but Google's been the worst, have collected just exabytes on us since, it's upwards of 40 or 50 exabytes on people, on pretty much every human being in the US since the year 2000. It's something I used to comment on was, remember a few years ago when the NSA was found to be getting just metadata from certain companies, and everybody lost their shit. Yep. I mean, it was like, and I said, yeah, but we need to. I said, but companies like Apple, Microsoft, Facebook, Netflix, even Google, any of these streaming services, they collect 1,000 times on each of us every day, and we're cool with it. Why? Because Gmail's free.
And also the problem is not so much that they collect it. There's no regulation that I am aware of, or there's very, very regulation about what they can do with it, and that's really a huge problem, because I know there have been issues with law enforcement being involved. I know there have been issues with them selling information to other entities. So that, I think, is something that we need to talk about. What do we want in terms of having some control over it? Well, I know in Europe there's more control over it than there's in this country, because in Europe, if there's negative information about you, you could say, hey, there's negative information about me, and that's not true. You need to take it off.
I have a solution.
Over here, you have no.
I have a solution that will put Zanita at calm. The solution is something that Bernadette kind of mentioned already, and something we have always talked about, even on the show, creating our village of people that we care, compassionate about, creating that circle of unity. Who cares about what information other people know? Because we're part of a community. We'll share goods. It will go back to not just the barter system, but I grow this, you grow that, I can do this, you can do that. That eradicates the fear of what am I going to do? But if you feel isolated, you are going to be fearful of how do I protect myself in crime? How do I protect myself in data? How do I protect myself in money? If you feel isolated, you're going to have those problems. But if you feel like you're alone, you're going to be fearful. But if you feel like you have a community that you can call upon, walk towards, knock on the door, because that's where, when Jeff says we've been isolating ourselves for a very long time. And I say, I can look at the downfall in just my own little comical data, that we've been going downward since the remote control. Since we stopped getting up to change the channel on the TV. We stopped being a family. Because when you watch TV with your kids, and I was one of those small kids, I was the remote control. Change the channel.
Yeah, I was the remote control.
I was the remote control, so.
And I have to say, I am glad that I graduated from that. So I love remote control.
I want to know how many people find Snopes reliable when there's something that needs to be fact checked, because they checked that executive order 14067 and concluded that it won't replace the U.S. dollar with trackable Biden bucks, as they call them.
I find Snopes to be very reliable over the years.
Yeah, I use a lot of it.
It doesn't mean they hit every single thing, but honestly, I have found them to be better than 99% reliable in debunking a lot of crap that's running around out there.
Yeah, so they they did something on that executive order that Biden signed and found that to be false. And they wrote why they said it was false. So if you would like to go to Snopes about that and get more information.
Well, tell people on our live podcast how to get to Snopes.
Well, it's garbage in, garbage out. If you trust the Biden administration, that's fine. But if you don't trust the Biden administration, then,
that's how filters work, Marylin. It's like that's the problem. If you run into a paranoid person truly believes that everyone is out to get them, and it's like, and if anything goes wrong, they'll point to that and say, "See, look, I was right."
But like they said, even the most paranoid person has enemies. So everyone might not be out to get them, but there might be someone out there trying to get them. We're trying to,
that's true too.
Get something.
And see,
exactly.
And see, that gets to the point of conspiracy theories, which also drives the country apart in a lot of ways too.
Yes,
but
there are conspiracies out there.
But my point being,
I agree.
The problem with conspiracy theories is that their existence is their own proof, essentially. So it's all circular logic and circularly referential, but it's at the same time.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that doesn't mean that there are no conspiracies. There's some conspiracies. There might not be.
But
something might not be a conspiracy, but conspiracies do exist.
The problem is that most conspiracy theories will operate on the premise of that the very fact that you can't find evidence for it is proof that it actually happens, because they don't want you to know, and they're being very effective at it.
Mm-hmm. But isn't the end of the petrodollar having a huge impact where all the countries, in order to buy oil in particular, they had to convert their currency into dollars.
Well, the reason for that, Sunita, the reason that it's always been that way. It's been that way since World War II.
It sure
and it wasn't because of petrodollars. It was because the U.S. was primarily the only manufacturer in the world for a long time. So we had this very strong economy. We had this very strong dollar. I'm not as worried by a weaker dollar as some people are. And that's because a weaker dollar actually increases our exports and decreases our imports. It tends to balance things out. It gives us a smaller deficit. It actually strengthens our economy on the global scale because there's less of a reason to. There's more. I was going to say there's less of a reason to block buying from us. A better way to put that is there's more of an incentive to buy from us. Right. China is seeing the reverse problem now. As they've controlled the yuan for so long that it's actually starting to work against them, and they're actually whining and complaining right now because much of their own manufacturing base is starting to move to places like Vietnam, Bangladesh, India, and Indonesia. Why? And Taiwan, right? Why? Because it's cheaper. The labor market's cheaper. China has this particular problem with Taiwan because Taiwan is the primary manufacturer of very high-end chips, which China doesn't have access to because Taiwan won't sell to them. No. And what that does is it set China's military behind a good 10 or 15 years, and that freaks them out at the moment.
This is why the threat of China invading Taiwan is this is why one of the things with Russia and Ukraine is watched very closely. Because if Russia succeeds, which I don't think they will, then any other country will try to do it to their local neighbor, which is China and Taiwan. And that's why we're fighting Russia on a global scale with proxy through the Ukraine. But by that, we also stop. We cause some embargoes and things against Russia, but Russia's making more money because they're exporting more stuff.
Because they're selling oil real cheap right now.
Right. So and they're making
not in U.S. dollars.
Right. They got whatever they call it going on.
The BRICS.
Yeah.
Yes. And so America is losing its world reserve currency status because now they're starting to use the dollar as a weapon of war with sanctions. And people around the country are looking at that and they don't want that to happen to them. It's happened to Zimbabwe has happened to other countries.
Well, a lot of Africa uses Russia's oil. They can't. Where are they supposed to get their oil from if you're saying that they can't get it from?
Yeah, not only that, a lot of Europe is using Russia's gas.
They needed it.
Honestly, you don't want to get me started on a lot of this stuff because if any of you remember, Presidents Ford and Carter back in the 70s started a multitude of alternative fuel sources, projects into alternative fuel sources,
and they shut them down.
Sources, renewable fuels. Reagan shut them all down the first month that he was in office because he owed all those oil companies his position in the White House.
That's right.
If those projects had been continued, we wouldn't even be having this debate now.
At all.
The U.S. would be a completely green-powered country. We would be the only manufacturer of green technologies on the planet, and everybody would be coming to us for stuff.
And wasn't it Reagan that also took us off the gold standard?
No, that was FDR.
That was FDR.
Yeah,
I thought it was Reagan. I thought it was Nixon.
That was 1933 in FDR.
It was no,
it was Nixon.
In the 60s,
it was Nixon.
That came off of the.
Well, that was when it was finalized, but we had a dual standard after 1933 where we started this credit-based system. By the time of Nixon looked at the U.S. gold reserves and realized that we didn't have enough gold in our reserves to have covered even 1% of the amount of value that we had in our economy. So it was decided that, okay, we're just going to go fully on credit at this point. But we also can point to the repeal of Glass-Steagall in 1999, which allowed banks to merge their commercial and investment sides, which meant that all ordinary people like all of us who had FDIC-insured deposits, our money could be used to make billions and even trillions of dollars for investors, and that those banks didn't have to share with us. Right. There was a time when they they made money off of loans, off the commercial side,
give it back.
And they were required to give it back to us through higher interest rates. But once that they didn't have to do that, they could keep all those investments for themselves. The rich made out like, proverbial bandits. And the worst part was that if they made a mistake, because most of those monies were covered by FDIC-insured funds, the federal government would bail them all out. Yep. Another issue that we have is what's called Clause 2 of Article 4 of the Constitution, where the Constitution requires that the federal government will honor the full faith and credit of every state in the country. So where this has been manifesting itself, and again, this is where we have a lot of issues, where this has manifested itself is in that you can have states like, say, Florida or Texas that artificially lower their taxes well below what otherwise would be needed to support their internal economies. And they know fully well that because they can, even though they're running deficits, the federal government will bail them out. There is only one state in the entire country which doesn't have a balanced budget amendment, and that's Vermont. Okay? Every state in the country, otherwise, 49 states have balanced budget amendments. Okay? So the whole idea that some kind of balanced budget amendments are going to magically fix the deficit issues are spoken by people who don't really understand Article 4 of the Constitution. Because Texas can say, oh, well, we're not going to have anybody pay any taxes. Well, guess what? That's fantastic for companies because they love it. They're not paying anything. But the federal government still has to cover that deficit that Texas runs. So they can be as incompetent as they want. And the rest of us, like here in Maryland or New York or Illinois or California, we pay for that. We pay that balance off. It is not at all surprising that of the top 10 states in the U.S. that pay more money into the federal system than they get back, 9 of them are run by the Democratic Party. And of the top 10 states which, receive more money than they pay, 8 of them are Republicans. That's not a shock at all.
No,
given this tendency,
and it's purposeful.
Yes, it is. And the problem is that because of that, we have these people who look at this and they say, "See, look at how great we run things because we have low taxes and we still have good economies."
No,
and this gets to Bernadette's point about education,
right?
Because if people understood what the Constitution actually said, they would realize that these Republicans are, forgive my mouth, full of shit. And I apologize because I know you're recording and I shouldn't have said that.
No, it's okay.
It's like they're full of themselves, right? And it's like they can get away with it because people don't understand anymore. This keeps exaggerating. It keeps growing and building. This is what the bad part is, and this is why education is so important. In 2015,
which is why the education
CEO
is being demolished.
Oh yes, that was one of the very first things Republicans did, is they hollowed out all the education budgets all over the place. This is something to be regarded. In 2015, the then CEO of Google gave a speech before seniors in New York City, and he actually said that critical thinking was a Google search. I wasn't teaching anymore, but I still had a lot of teacher friends, and I listened to his speech, and all of us had a universal cringe, because critical thinking involves something teachers will call it all the time. It involves something called synthesis, which is the idea of creating something new from old ideas. Mm-hmm. I've often challenged people who say, oh, the internet will tell you anything, or Google search will tell you everything. No. I said, okay, do the following search. Tell me something no one's ever known before.
That's so true.
And
go ahead.
We have a lot of countries moving back to the gold standard.
Yeah.
But they have to have enough specie to be able to cover their economies, unfortunately. And if they don't have it, they're going to be facing some severe...
As we continue to talk, I want to thank everyone for listening to You Be the Judge, and we'll be here next week, next Wednesday. Thank you.